Ranger Samuel O.D. didn't hesitate. He jammed the gear stick forward, and the Jeep lurched down the dirt track, scattering dry grass and red dust into the air. Beside him sat wildlife veterinarian Layla and George, gripping her medical kit tightly as the vehicle bounced violently over uneven ground. The African sun had only begun to rise, but already the plains shimmered with heat. Neither spoke. The tension in the air was enough. They both knew what a difficult birth meant in the wild. It was a death sentence if help came too late. The radio crackled again. She's under the old acacia near the eastern ridge. Still alive, but fading fast. Samuel pressed harder on the accelerator. His eyes swept the horizon, golden and endless, broken only by lonely acacia trees and the silhouettes of distant herds. "Hold on, girl," he muttered under his breath. When they finally reached the site, the scene stole the breath from their lungs. Beneath a single, weathered acacia lay a lioness, massive, regal, yet broken. Her golden coat was matted with dust, her ribs visible through taut skin. Her breathing came in short, ragged bursts. The ground beneath her was marked with clawed grooves, signs of hours of agony. "She's been like this all night," Layla whispered, kneeling beside the Jeep. "We have to move quickly." Samuel's gaze hardened. "Trank first, then we work." He loaded the dart rifle with practiced precision. The shot hissed through the hot air, striking her gently in the flank. A weak growl trembled from her throat, but within minutes her muscles slackened, her breathing slowing into the deep rhythm of sedation. "Let's go," Samuel said. They approached carefully. The silence of the savannah felt unnatural, heavy with waiting. Layla knelt beside the lioness, her hands tracing the animal's swollen abdomen. The cub was still inside, but something was terribly wrong. "She's dehydrated. The cub's position is abnormal. If we don't get it out soon, she'll lose both her life and theirs." Samuel nodded grimly, laying out the medical tools on a sterilized cloth. The open plain became an impromptu operating room. The air shimmered with heat as Layla disinfected the area and made a careful incision. Her hands worked quickly, methodically, every second stretching long and thin. Sweat trickled down her temples as the metallic scent of blood mingled with dust. The faint hum of insects and the low hiss of wind through grass were the only sounds. Then, Layla froze. "I've got movement." Samuel leaned closer, eyes locked on her hands. "Easy. Come on, little one," she murmured, easing the cub free. The first tiny body slid into her palms, slick and unmoving. For one terrifying moment, nothing. Layla rubbed its chest with gauze, clearing fluid from its mouth and nostrils. "Come on, breathe." Seconds passed. Then, a gasp. The cub twitched, then released a weak cry. It was small, fragile, but alive. Samuel exhaled a shaky breath. "That's one," he said softly, but the lioness wasn't done. Another contraction rippled through her body. Layla worked again, her movements steady despite the pounding in her chest. The second cub came out weaker, limp as cloth. She repeated the same motions, rubbing, clearing, stimulating. Nothing. Her hands didn't stop. She pressed gently at its tiny chest, giving faint breaths through its muzzle. One heartbeat, then another. Suddenly, the cub coughed and squealed, barely audible but full of life. Layla smiled through tears. "Two. We've got two." They worked quickly to clean the incision, disinfecting and stitching the wound with care. Layla administered antibiotics and 4 fluids, while Samuel shaded her body with a tarp to cool her down. The lioness's breathing steadied, though shallowed by midday. The operation was complete. Both rescuers sat back on their heels, exhausted, faces streaked with sweat. Around them, the savannah stretched silent and endless, as if holding its breath. "She's stable," Layla whispered. "Now we wait." Samuel nodded and handed her a canteen of water. They sat beside the Jeep, watching, time measured only by the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. Flies buzzed lazily in the heat. The newborn cubs, wrapped in soft cloth, whimpered faintly beside their mother. Then, just before dusk, the lioness stirred. Her tail twitched, her head lifted slightly. The sedation was wearing off. Layla held her breath. "Easy now, Mama." The lioness's eyes opened, hazy and unfocused. Then her nostrils flared, catching the scent of her cubs. She turned her massive head toward them. her breath trembling as she recognized them. A low, guttural rumble escaped her throat, not a growl, but a sound of deep instinct. Slowly, painfully, she dragged herself closer and began to lick their tiny bodies clean. The two cubs squirmed weakly. Pressing into her warmth, Layla's voice quivered. "She knows them." Samuel smiled faintly. Nature never forgets. The fading sunlight spilled gold over the scene. The lioness, her newborns, the scar across her flank. It was raw and imperfect, yet impossibly beautiful. For a long moment, neither rescuer moved. That night, they set up a small observation camera and left quietly. The wind carried away the scent of antiseptic, blending again with the wild's eternal rhythm. Back at the ranger station, the footage played in silence hours later. The lioness slept curled around her cubs, chest rising and falling peacefully. Layla sat motionless, her eyes glistening. "She's safe?" she whispered. 3 days later, the rangers returned. The spot beneath the acacia was empty. Only paw prints remained, large ones followed by 2 smaller sets, pressed deep into the red earth. Samuel crouched beside them, a faint smile tugging at his lips. She took them home. They followed the tracks a few meters before stopping. In the distance, through the waving grass, the lioness was visible, stronger now, her stride steady, her cubs bounding at her side. The afternoon light wrapped around her like fire. Layla lowered her binoculars, whispering, "We almost lost her." Samuel nodded, but she never gave up. That's what saved her. For a long while, they stood watching. The cubs pounced at each other, their tiny growls lost in the breeze. The lioness turned once, glancing toward the distant figures of her rescuers. For a second, their eyes met, 2 worlds sharing a silent understanding. Then she turned and disappeared into the tall grass. Her cubs close behind, back at the station. The footage was filed under a single line of text. Case number 49, successful rescue. Lioness and cubs survived, but those who had been there knew it was more than a rescue. It was a reminder of resilience, of compassion, of the fragile thread that connects every living being under the African sun. Weeks passed, and her story spread among the rangers. They called her Nalani, the one who endures. Months later, camera traps captured her again. Nalani stood at the edge of a watering hole, her cubs now larger, healthy, playful. She watched them with calm pride as they wrestled in the mud. Layla smiled as she watched the footage. "A heart-stopping miracle," she whispered. Samuel glanced at her, half smiling. "No, that's nature, doing what it does best." Outside, the wind rustled through the tall grass, and the sound of life moved once more across the Mara. Somewhere out there, beneath the same rising sun, a lioness led her young through the golden plains, proof that even in the harshest wilderness, hope still roars.